Mom slid the envelope across the Christmas table and said, "This is your last holiday with us, Natalie. You're not getting a penny." I stayed quiet, but inside I was already planning the gift that would change everything. What she didn't know was that I'd been recording every cruel word for months. I'm Natalie Foster, and I'm 28 years old. I work as a legal assistant at Martinez & Associates downtown. My whole life I've been the family disappointment. While my sister Jessica became a successful marketing director with the perfect husband and 2 kids, I lived alone in a studio apartment, struggling to pay rent. I wasn't the golden child who brought home report cards full of A's or got married in a fairy tale wedding. But I had something they didn't expect: patience and a very good memory. While Jessica got the praise, the money, the attention at every family gathering, I learned to survive on scraps of acknowledgement. But surviving taught me to be observant, to document, to prepare. I watched. I listened. I remembered everything. If you've ever been the family disappointment who turned out to be the smart one, hit subscribe and drop your location in the comments. I read every one. This story gets wild and you won't want to miss what happens next. That Christmas dinner was supposed to be special. Mum had decorated the dining room with her expensive china, the kind she only brought out for holidays. The smell of roasted turkey filled the house, and Christmas lights twinkled through the frost-covered windows. Extended family packed around the long wooden table, aunts, uncles, cousins, all there to witness what Mum called an important family announcement. I thought maybe she was finally going to acknowledge something good I'd done, maybe my recent promotion at the law firm, maybe the fact that I'd helped Dad fix his computer problems for the 3rd time that month. But when she stood up with that manila envelope in her hands, I knew I was wrong. "Everyone, I have something important to share about our family's future," Mum announced, her voice carrying that formal tone she used when she wanted to sound important. "Your father and I have made some difficult decisions about our estate." She looked directly at me when she said it. "Natalie, you've never shown responsibility. You live in that tiny apartment. You can barely manage your own life. We've decided Jessica deserves everything. She's proven herself." The words hit me like ice water. I felt my hands start to shake under the table. Dad nodded along, cutting his turkey with deliberate precision. "Jessica has given us grandchildren. She's stable. She's married. She makes good choices." Jessica didn't even have the decency to look uncomfortable. She just smiled that perfect smile and said, "Don't take it personally, Nat. Maybe if you'd made better choices, things would be different." I looked around the table. Uncle Bob was staring at his plate. Aunt Linda kept fidgeting with her napkin. Cousin Mike looked like he wanted to disappear, but nobody said anything. Nobody defended me. The envelope contained a formal letter, typed on expensive letterhead, removing me from the will entirely. Every asset, the house, the savings accounts, Dad's small business, all going to Jessica. But Mum wasn't finished. "Oh, and Natalie, we're also selling your childhood bedroom furniture next week. Since you won't be coming home anymore anyway, we might as well make some money off it." The Christmas lights suddenly seemed too bright. The sound of everyone chewing seemed impossibly loud. I felt like I was watching everything through a fog. I stayed completely silent. I just nodded and said, "I understand." But inside, I was cataloguing every cruel word, every dismissive look, every moment of humiliation. What they didn't know was that this wasn't the first time Mum had threatened to cut me off, and I'd been preparing. 2 weeks later, the first text message arrived. It was from Dad's phone, but I knew Mum had typed it. "Since you're not family anymore, you need to pay us back for the food and gifts we wasted on you over the years. Total bill, $1,1200. Payment due immediately." I stared at my phone screen in disbelief. They were billing me for Christmas dinners, for birthday presents they'd given me as a child, for holiday visits home. I paid it immediately, every penny. But I screenshot every text message and saved every bank transaction record. 1 month later, Jessica's engagement party invitation arrived in my mailbox. But something was wrong. Instead of being listed as Jessica's sister, I was marked down as +1 to cousin Mike. When I called Jessica to ask about it, she laughed. "Oh, that. Yeah, Mum thought it would be easier if you came as Mike's guest instead of, as my sister. Less complicated for the seating chart." At the party, they seated me at the kids' table, 28 years old, sitting between Jessica's 7-year-old son and her friend's toddler. I watched from across the room as Mum raised her champagne glass and announced to the 50 guests, "Jessica is our only successful daughter. Natalie is, well, we're still hoping she'll figure it out." The whole room laughed. Some people looked uncomfortable, but they laughed. Later, Jessica pulled me into the bathroom. Listen, Nat, Mum thinks you might embarrass us at the actual wedding. Maybe you should just send a gift instead of coming. It would be better for everyone." I looked at my sister in the bathroom mirror. She was reapplying her lipstick like she'd just asked me to pass the salt. "Sure, Jessica, whatever makes you happy." But I was still recording everything. 6 weeks later, Dad had a minor heart episode. Nothing serious, just chest pains that landed him in the hospital overnight for observation. I found out 3 days later from Mrs. Peterson next door, who mentioned it while getting her mail. "Oh, honey, didn't you know? Your dad's been in the hospital since Tuesday. Your mum and Jessica have been there round the clock." I drove straight to the hospital. When I walked into Dad's room, the silence was deafening. Mum looked up from her chair beside his bed. "What are you doing here? This is for real family only." Jessica was sitting by the window, scrolling through her phone. She didn't even look up when she said, "We didn't want to worry you, Nat. You wouldn't have been able to help anyway." Dad just stared at the ceiling. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. Each betrayal hurt more than the last. I started questioning everything. My childhood memories, my worth, whether I'd imagined being loved by these people. But I also became more determined. Every cruel word, every exclusion, every humiliation was being documented. Because what they didn't know was that I'd been working with David Martinez, the senior partner at my law firm, for months, and I'd discovered something that would change everything. The previous summer, when I'd helped clean out Grandmother's attic, I'd found something tucked behind an old photo album, original property deeds, financial documents, and a letter in Grandmother's handwriting that made my blood run cold. Grandmother had left specific instructions. The family house, the one Mum and Dad were so excited to leave to Jessica, didn't belong to them. It belonged to me. Grandmother had put it in a trust with my name on it when I turned 25. I'd been the legal owner for 3 years without knowing it. But there was more, much more. The $300,000 trust fund that was supposed to support me through college and beyond? My parents had been stealing from it for years, taking money they claimed was for family expenses and Natalie's support. Money that had actually been funding Jessica's wedding, her house down payment, her children's private school tuition. Every cruel word was being preserved forever on my phone's recording app, and soon they'd understand why. They thought they were punishing me, but they were actually building my case. David Martinez had been watching my family treat me like garbage for years. Every time I came to work with red eyes after a family dinner, every time I made excuses for why I couldn't afford lunch with co-workers because I'd had to send money home for some family emergency, he'd noticed. When I finally told him what was happening, he didn't hesitate. "I can't stand seeing good people destroyed by toxic families," he said. "We're taking this case, and we're going to expose everything." David helped me organize every recording, every text message, every financial document. We discovered that my parents hadn't just been stealing from my trust fund. They'd been systematically mismanaging Grandmother's entire estate. They were drowning in debt, and desperately counting on selling the house to cover what they owed. Meanwhile, my family grew more confident in their cruelty. Mum started telling neighbours how relieved she was to have finally dealt with the Natalie problem. Jessica's wedding plans became increasingly elaborate, funded by money they thought they'd inherit. Dad made appointments with real estate agents to sell Grandmother's house immediately after the holidays. They even created a new family group chat called Real Family Only, just to mock my absence from their conversations. But the final piece of evidence came when Mum called me the night before Jessica's wedding. "Don't embarrass us by showing up tomorrow," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Everyone knows you're not really family anymore. Save yourself the humiliation." That phone call was the last thing I needed. Jessica's wedding was beautiful. White roses everywhere, string quartet, 200 guests in the country club's garden pavilion. I watched from the back as she walked down the aisle in her $1,000 dress, paid for with money stolen from my inheritance. During the reception, as guests enjoyed their salmon and champagne, I stood up and walked to the microphone. "Excuse me, everyone. I'm Natalie, Jessica's sister. I have something to share about our family that I think everyone should know." The room went quiet. Jessica looked confused. Mum's face went white. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the sound system. "This is a recording from last Christmas," I announced, and Mum's voice filled the room. "She's not really our daughter anyway. We should have cut her off years ago. She's just a burden on this family." Then Dad's voice. "Natalie has always been the family mistake. At least Jessica turned out right." Gasps echoed through the pavilion. I played 3 more recordings, each one worse than the last. Then I held up a folder full of documents. "These are bank records showing that my parents have been stealing from my grandmother's estate for over 5 years. The house they promised to Jessica, it legally belongs to me. The trust fund they said didn't exist, it's worth $300,000, and I've been the beneficiary since I turned 25. Mom stood up, her face red with rage. "You're making this up, you manipulative little—" "Where did you get those documents?" Dad shouted. "That's illegal." Jessica's new husband looked horrified. "Jessica, what is she talking about?" Jessica herself seemed frozen, her bouquet trembling in her hands. "This is my wedding day. How could you ruin this?" But Uncle Bob, who'd been quiet at every family dinner, finally spoke up. "She's telling the truth. I helped your grandmother set up that trust. I've been waiting for someone to ask the right questions." David Martinez stepped up beside me, imposing in his expensive suit. "I'm Mrs. Foster's legal representation. Everything she's presented here today is documented and verified. Your parents face potential criminal charges for estate mismanagement and theft." The room erupted. Some guests were applauding, others were arguing. Jessica's mother-in-law looked like she wanted to disappear. I held up my hand for silence. "I'm not here to destroy anyone," I said, my voice carrying across the stunned crowd. "I'm here to reclaim what was always mine. Mum, Dad, you have 2 choices. You can publicly apologize for the years of emotional abuse and return every penny you've stolen, or I press criminal charges and you lose everything." For the first time in my life, my parents had nothing to say. The silence didn't hurt me this time. It freed me. Within 6 months, everything changed. My parents were forced to sell their house to pay back the estate. Jessica's marriage started under the shadow of family scandal, with her new in-laws questioning what kind of family they'd married into. The extended family, who'd watched me get humiliated for years, finally understood who the real villains were. As for me, I had access to grandmother's real inheritance, enough to buy my own house and start the life I'd always wanted. More importantly, I finally understood I never needed their approval. Grandmother had already given me everything I needed, not just money, but the strength to stand up for myself. I got promoted at work after David saw how well I'd handled my own case. I stopped going to family events where I wasn't wanted. I started building relationships with people who actually valued me. The best part? I never had to see them again, unless I chose to. If you've ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect, drop a comment and tell me your story. Where are you watching from? I always respond because your story matters too. Hit that subscribe button if you believe people should face consequences for their cruelty, even if they're family. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting free. And remember, just because someone shares your DNA doesn't mean they deserve your loyalty. Share this with someone who needs to hear that message. Next week, I'm sharing what happened when Jessica tried to get the money back, and why that backfired worse than Christmas dinner.